The coffee machine in the break room on the 31st floor had been broken for 11 days, which meant I'd been walking to the lobby cafe every morning at 7:52 exactly, ordering the same medium dark roast, carrying it back up in the elevator while it was still hot enough to be useful. Small rituals. That's how you survive a job like this. I'd been executive assistant to Elliot Harmon for 2 years and 4 months. Not that I was counting, except that I absolutely was, because in a role like mine, time is the only currency you actually own. Harmon Capital wasn't a household name the way Goldman or BlackRock were, but in private equity circles it was the kind of firm that made people either very eager or very careful when they entered a room. Elliot ran it the way he ran everything, with a precision that bordered on unsettling, and a patience that made rivals underestimate him until it was too late. My desk sat at the corner of the 31st floor, positioned so I could see both elevator banks and the glass wall of his office simultaneously. Not by accident. Everything about this job had been designed by someone who thought in systems. My name is Ellie Brandt. I had a graduate degree in finance that I'd never fully used, a studio apartment in Midtown I could barely afford, and an instinct for anticipating problems that Elliot Harmon had once described, without a trace of warmth, as unusually reliable. That was the closest thing to a compliment I'd received in 2 years and 4 months. The morning everything started, I was reconciling quarterly disbursement schedules when the front desk called up. "Ms. Brandt, there's a delivery, addressed to you personally." I frowned at my screen. I didn't receive personal deliveries at the office. I'd made a point of that. What kind of delivery? A gift basket. Pretty elaborate one. I went down myself because sending someone else felt like making too big a deal of it. The basket was sitting at the security desk, wrapped in dark green cellophane, the kind of presentation that suggested either a very generous client or someone with something to prove. A small envelope was tucked into the ribbon. I opened it in the elevator on the way back up. "For the woman who keeps everything running, you deserve to be noticed." No signature. I set the basket on the corner of my desk and stared at it for approximately 30 seconds. Then I went back to the disbursement schedule because I had a 9:15 meeting to prep for, and anonymous gift baskets did not rank higher than Elliot's meeting prep on my priority list. At 9:13, I carried the folders into his office. Elliot was standing at the window the way he always did before important calls, hands in his pockets, looking at the city like he was deciding whether to buy it. He turned when he heard me come in, and his gaze went immediately past me to the basket visible through the glass wall. "What is that?" "A gift basket. It was delivered this morning." "From who?" No signature. Something shifted in his expression. Barely visible, the way a fault line shifts before anything actually breaks. "Have security log it and identify the sender." "It's a gift basket, Mr. Harmon. Have security log it." His voice didn't change pitch or volume. It never did. "And don't eat anything in it." I didn't argue. 2 years and 4 months had taught me the specific difference between his requests and his orders. That had been an order. By noon, security had traced the delivery to a corporate account registered to a company called Meridian Trade Group. The name meant nothing to me. Judging by the way, Elliot went quiet when he read the security report. Not thoughtful quiet, but the particular stillness of someone holding something down. The name meant quite a lot to him. He called me into his office at 12:40. Not over the intercom. He came to my desk himself, which he did approximately never. "Close your afternoon. You have a 2 o'clock with. Reschedule it." I looked at him. "Everything?" "Everything." I did. And then I sat at my desk wondering what Meridian Trade Group had to do with a gift basket, and why either of those things had the ability to make Elliot Harmon clear his entire afternoon. I found out 3 hours later, when he finally called me into his office, closed the door himself, which he also almost never did, and set a thick folder on the desk between us. "Sit down, Ellie." The use of my first name should have been my first warning. In 2 years and 4 months, I could count on one hand the number of times he'd used it. "The gift basket was sent by a man named Conrad Vale," he said. "His family runs Meridian Trade Group. They operate shipping logistics throughout the Gulf of Mexico and the eastern seaboard. Legitimate on the surface. And underneath?" He looked at me steadily. "Underneath, they facilitate the movement of certain goods through certain ports in ways that avoid regulatory scrutiny. Customs irregularities." Routing arrangements that don't hold up if anyone looks closely. He paused. 3 years ago, Meridian approached Harmon Capital about a partnership. Infrastructure investment, they called it. I declined. Why? Because I had enough information to know what I'd actually be investing in. He opened the folder. Conrad Vale's son, Liam, has been present at 4 locations where you've been in the past 2 months. Your gym, the Thursday farmers market you go to on 73rd Street, the coffee shop on your block. A pause. The Strand, the Saturday you spent 3 hours there in October. The floor felt less solid than it had a moment ago. You've been tracking where I go. I've been tracking where he goes. Elliot met my gaze without flinching. Since September, when I noticed him at a charity auction where you were volunteering, and he spent 40 minutes find reasons to be near the registration table where you were working. 40 minutes. I thought about September. I thought about the auction, the long tables, the man in the dark jacket who'd asked me twice whether certain lots were still available. I hadn't thought twice about it. I ran charity registrations. People asked questions. What does he want? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. Elliot's jaw tightened. You process every major deal flow that crosses this desk. You know our portfolio structure, our LP relationships, our wire protocols. You've signed off on documents that, in the wrong hands, could expose transaction histories that I've spent considerable effort keeping private. He looked at me. Liam Vale doesn't send gift baskets to women he finds charming, Ellie. He does it to women he's identified as access points. The word accessed point sat in my stomach like something cold. You're saying he's been watching me for 2 months to get to you? Yes, I thought about the right way to respond to that. There wasn't one. What do I do? Nothing yet. Don't acknowledge the basket. Don't respond if he reaches out directly. Elliot closed the folder. And I want you moved to a different building entrance starting tomorrow. Varying routes. I'm adjusting your building access protocols. Mr. Harmon, Ellie. The way he said my name this time was different. Quieter. Like he was being careful with it. I've put you in a position without meaning to. The exposure you have in this role made you a target without your knowledge or consent. The least I can do is take reasonable precautions. I walked back to my desk with the particular feeling of someone who has just discovered the ground they've been standing on is different from what they thought. Liam Vale texted me 4 days later. I didn't know how he had my personal number. I hope you liked the basket. I've been wanting to introduce myself properly. Dinner this week? I sat in my apartment staring at the message for a long moment. Then I called Elliot's private line. The one reserved for genuine emergencies, of which I'd used exactly twice in 2 years and 4 months. He picked up on the second ring. He texted me, personal cell. I don't know how he got the number. Silence on Elliot's end, not the thinking kind, the controlled kind. Forward it to me. Don't respond. Don't delete, okay, and Ellie. A beat. Lock your doors. I'm sending someone to your building tonight. That's not necessary. It is. His voice was flat in a way that meant the conversation was over. Do as I say. I forwarded the message. I locked my doors. I spent 20 minutes standing in my kitchen telling myself this was a professional situation being handled professionally, and that the tightness in my chest was reasonable given the circumstances, and had nothing to do with the way Elliot had said my name. A second text arrived at 11:47 p.m. I think we have things to discuss that could benefit both of us. I know more about the man you work for than you might expect. I didn't sleep well. The next morning, Elliot met me at my desk before I'd even taken off my coat. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Conference room B now, not my office. Conference room B was the one on the interior wall, no windows, swept for listening devices quarterly. I'd only been in it 3 times. He'd already spread documents across the table when I arrived. He closed the door and remained standing. Liam Vale is more sophisticated than I initially indicated. Elliot moved to the nearest document, a printed dossier, photographs and financial records interleaved. He's been building a case. Not just watching you. Compiling information about Harmon Capital's transaction history, specifically the deals from 3 years ago, when I was declining his family's partnership. What does he have? Potentially enough to create a misleading narrative, if presented selectively. Elliot's voice stayed even. The partnership I declined wasn't just a business decision. I had information about Meridian's irregular routing that I passed to a contact at the Treasury Department. Informally, off the record. He looked at me. Meridian's Gulf operations faced increased regulatory scrutiny 6 months later. They lost 3 major contracts. His father spent 18 months rebuilding. The shape of it became clear. And Liam thinks you sabotaged them. Liam knows I did. Elliot's expression didn't change. The question is whether he can prove it in a way that causes damage, or whether his evidence is thin enough that he needs additional material to make his case. Material he thinks you can provide. My access to your deal records. Yes, I sat down. Not because I was told to, because I needed to think. So what are we doing? He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. There's an option I want to put to you. Not as your employer, as someone asking for your help. That sentence from Elliot Harmon was so unusual that I had to consciously keep my expression neutral. Liam will contact you again. When he does, I'd like you to respond. Meet with him. Let him believe you're open to his approach. While you're doing that, we document every offer he makes, every request, every explicit ask for confidential information. He paused. And then we take all of it to a federal securities attorney I've worked with and let her determine what charges apply. You want me to run a sting operation on Conrad Vale's son. I want you to help me end this without it turning into something more destructive. He met my eyes. I want you to have a choice. If you say no, I find another solution. I thought about what other solution meant for a man like Elliot Harmon, who had spent 3 years carefully dismantling a corrupt shipping network by working through the right official channels, who had, apparently, done something principled at real personal risk and never mentioned it once in 2 years and 4 months. What did Meridian actually do? I asked. The irregular routing. What was moving through those ports? He held my gaze. Agricultural chemicals that should have required hazmat routing. They were being moved through residential port access corridors to avoid the cost of compliant handling. There was a spill in Galveston in 2021 that was never properly attributed. 4 dock workers were hospitalized. A pause. That's why I flagged them. Not business rivalry. I looked at him for a long moment. Okay, I said. I'll do it. Something moved through his expression. Relief, maybe. Or something that was afraid to be relief yet. You have conditions. I can see it. Full information from here on. No more need to know. If I'm walking into something, I know exactly what I'm walking into. I kept my voice steady. And after this is over, we talk. About what this actually is. I gestured between us. Because I think we're both pretending something isn't there that very clearly is. He went very still. I'm your employee, he said finally. You called me Ellie twice yesterday. You haven't done that in 2 years. I stood. I'm not asking for anything right now. I'm telling you that I noticed, and that we're going to talk about it when this is done. Those are my conditions. He was quiet for long enough that I started to regret saying it. Then, agreed, both of them. The preparation took 5 days. A former federal investigator Elliot worked with met with me twice to coach me on conversational tactics, how to keep Liam talking without appearing to probe, how to let him make explicit offers without appearing to solicit them. Elliot sat in on the second session and barely said a word, but I felt him watching me the entire time. On the 3rd night, after everyone else had left, I found him in the conference room reviewing transcripts of Liam's texts. You don't have to do this, he said without looking up. We've established that I do. I could pursue this through other channels, slower channels, messier ones. I sat down across from him. This ends it cleanly. You know that. He set down the papers. I know that sending you to dinner with a man who wants to use you against me is not something I'm comfortable with. But you're asking me to do it anyway. I'm asking you to choose to do it. Those aren't the same thing. He looked up. I've been careful to preserve that distinction. I thought about that. About 2 years and 4 months of watching someone operate at close range, learning the difference between his actual values and his professional manner. He'd been careful, consistently, quietly careful in ways I'd catalogued without meaning to. I know you have, I said. That's part of why I said yes. He was quiet. Then, what's the rest of it? I looked at him across the table covered in security documents and printed texts from a man I'd never met, who'd spent 2 months learning my schedule in order to exploit it. The rest of it is that I understand now what you actually built here, and I'd like it to survive. Something broke open in his expression. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way a room changes when someone finally lets in some air. "I've been trying to protect you by keeping you at a distance," he said. "It hasn't worked very well." "No," I agreed. "It hasn't." He came around the table and stopped in front of me, and for a moment we just stood there, close enough that I could see the exhaustion around his eyes, the particular tension in his jaw that I'd spent 2 years learning to read. Then he said, "When this is over." "When this is over," I confirmed. He didn't kiss me, he just put his hand briefly over mine on the table, and that was somehow more significant than anything else that had happened in the last 5 days. Liam texted 2 days later, "I have some information I think you should see before making any decisions." "Somewhere neutral?" I responded. "The Monarch on 52nd. Thursday at 7. The Monarch was one of Elliot's restaurant investments. Every camera angle covered, every table mic'd, staff who knew the score. Liam would know Elliot had Manhattan connections but wouldn't know this particular connection. I wore a dark blazer over a simple dress and earrings that were slightly too nice for casual dinner. The kind of outfit that said I took this seriously without saying I dressed to impress you. He was already there when I arrived. Liam Vale in person was smooth in the way of someone who'd been trained to be charming rather than actually being it. Good jaw, easy posture. A smile that arrived just a half-second too quickly. He stood when I approached. "Ellie, thank you for coming." "I was curious," I said, which was true. He waited until our drinks arrived before starting his real approach. "How long have you worked for Harmon?" 2 years. "A little over, long time. You must know his operation well." "I know my job well. Those aren't always the same thing." He smiled like I'd said something clever. "Fair point. But someone in your position, executive assistant, close access to deal flow, you'd know more than the average employee. I know what I need to know to do my work, of course." He rotated his glass on the table. "I ask because I'm trying to understand the man. Elliot Harmon has a reputation for being scrupulously clean, but reputations are carefully managed. Sometimes the truth is more complicated. Everyone's truth is more complicated. Some more than others." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I have documentation of some transactions from 3 years ago that raise questions about how clean Harmon Capital's hands actually are. Decisions that affected my family significantly." He slid the envelope toward me. "I thought you deserved to know who you're actually working for." I didn't touch the envelope. "What kind of documentation?" "Wire transfers, correspondence with a treasury contact, evidence that Harmon didn't just decline a business partnership. He actively worked to dismantle my father's company." He paused. "That's not the action of a clean businessman, Ellie. That's someone using private channels to target a competitor. Or someone who flagged a safety violation," I said. The slight hesitation was almost invisible. "Almost. That's Harmon's narrative. Is it wrong?" "It's incomplete." His voice warmed, practiced. "Look, I'm not here to make you choose sides. I'm here because you have access to information that could give my family a fair chance to defend itself against someone who's been operating with no accountability. And I'm willing to compensate you for that fairly. $30,000 up front. Another $30,000 on delivery of specific documentation. Wire, routing summaries, LP contact records, anything that shows Harmon's treasury connection, in his own words. $60,000. For documentation that would let Conrad Vale rebuild a business that put dock workers in the hospital." I looked at Liam Vale across the table. At the practiced concern in his expression, the careful framing, the way he'd built up to this moment over 2 months, and a gift basket and texts to a phone number he had no legitimate way of obtaining. "That's a specific offer," I said. "I want to be direct with you. I respect that. I need time to think about it. Of course, take the week." He reached out and briefly touched the back of my hand. "You've been undervalued for a long time, Ellie. This is a chance to change that." I rode back to my apartment in a cab, not a car that could be traced to Elliot, and called him from the sidewalk outside my building. He made the offer. $60,000. He wants wire routing summaries and LP contacts and evidence of your treasury connection. A long pause. Explicit? On tape. Clean. Something in his exhale told me everything about how tightly he'd been holding himself through this. "You were perfect. I know," I said. "Now we finish it." The second meeting happened at the same restaurant 8 days later. This time I arrived to find Elliot already seated at a corner table. Something we hadn't planned, something that made Liam Vale stop in the doorway for exactly 2 seconds before recovering his composure and crossing the room. "Mr. Harmon." Liam's voice was smooth. "I didn't realize this was going to be a group conversation. I wanted to speak with you directly." Elliot's voice was pleasant in that particular way of his that meant nothing pleasant was forthcoming. "Ellie tells me you've made her a business proposition." Liam's eyes moved to me, reading me, recalculating. "She thought I deserved to know," Elliot said. "She was right." He set a folder on the table between them. "I have a counter-proposition. The recording of your explicit offer last Tuesday, documented evidence of your surveillance of a private citizen over a 2-month period, and a federal securities attorney who is very interested in the Meridian Trade Group's Gulf operations." He paused. "Or you walk out of here and you don't make contact with anyone associated with Harmon Capital again. Your family relocates its primary operations to the Gulf Hub, outside my sphere of interest, and I don't forward anything I have to anyone who might act on it." Liam was very still. "My father isn't going to accept." "Your father is tired," Elliot said. "I know Conrad Vale. He's been fighting for 3 years, and he's lost more than he's gained. This is an exit with some dignity left intact. That's more than he'd get from a federal investigation." He closed the folder. "You have 48 hours. After Liam left, Elliot and I sat at the corner table while the restaurant carried on around us. "You didn't tell me you were going to be here," I said. "I decided at the last minute." He looked at me. "I didn't like the idea of you being in the same room with him again without me present." "That's not rational, I know." He said it simply, without apology. "I've been irrational about a number of things for the better part of 2 years. I'm working on accepting that." Conrad Vale's attorneys contacted Elliot's the following morning. By the end of the week, the terms were agreed. Meridian's primary operations shifting to Houston, a signed agreement to cease contact, and a quiet acknowledgement from Conrad Vale himself, relayed through counsel, that he understood the arrangement. It was over. Elliot told me on a Tuesday, in the same conference room where this had all started. "It's done," he said. "The Vale situation is resolved." "Okay," I said. "You're going to say, 'I told you this would work.'" I wasn't going to say that. I looked at him across the table. I was going to say, "You owe me a conversation." He was quiet for a moment. Then he almost smiled, which on Elliot Harmon looked like a complete transformation of his face. "I do," he said. "Yes, we had dinner that Friday. Not at one of his restaurants. At a small Italian place I'd been going to since before this job. A neighborhood spot with bad lighting and very good pasta. The kind of place that didn't know who Elliot Harmon was. He wore a regular jacket and no tie, and looked slightly uncomfortable, being somewhere no one was watching him, which I found unexpectedly endearing. "Tell me something true," I said, after the bread arrived. "Not Elliot Harmon, the fund manager. Something actually true." He thought about it. "I have a dog. I don't tell people because it seems inconsistent with how I'm perceived." I blinked. "You have a dog." "A beagle. His name is Grant." "Grant. He's named after Cary Grant. My grandmother's idea. She gave him to me when I was going through a difficult period and thought I needed something that required care." He turned his water glass. She was right. I thought about what that said about who Elliot Harmon was when no one was recording the information. Then I thought about 2 years and 4 months of observing the space between someone's professional face and their actual character. "You flagged Meridian because of the dock workers," I said. "Yes. Not because of any advantage to your firm. There was no advantage. It was actually a significant complication." He looked at me. "But I'd seen the Galveston incident report. I knew what they were doing and why the costs were what they were. I couldn't unknow it." "That's not nothing," I said. "That's actually quite a lot." "I'm not a good man," he said carefully. "I want to be honest about that. I've made decisions in this business that I'd make differently with the perspective I have now. I operate in spaces that require compromises I'm not always proud of." "I know. And you're still here. I'm still here because I've watched you for 2 years. I know the compromises you make and the ones you don't." I met his eyes. "The ones you won't. That matters more than the rest of it." He looked at me the way he had in the conference room the night I'd told him we were going to talk. Like something in him was doing a calculation and arriving at an answer it hadn't expected. "I've been in love with you since approximately month 6, he said. "I recognized it precisely because it was inconvenient, and I tried very hard to make it go away. That strategy was not effective. "No," I said. "I don't imagine it was. I don't know how to do this," he said. "A relationship. Something real. I've spent so long treating personal things as complications to be managed that I'm not sure I know how to not do that." "I'm not asking you to be someone different," I said. "I'm asking you to be honest with me, always, even when it's difficult. That's the only thing I actually need. I can do that." He said it like a contract, like a commitment he'd already decided to honor. "I can do that, Ellie." We were there for 3 hours. When we finally left, the restaurant was nearly empty, and the rain had started outside. He held the door, and then, on the sidewalk, put his hand over mine again the way he had in the conference room. And this time I turned toward him, and he kissed me once, carefully, in the rain on 67th Street, and it felt like something that had been building for 2 years and 4 months finally arriving where it was supposed to go. The months after that were not simple. I transitioned out of my role as his assistant, as we'd both known I'd need to, building a client base of my own through consulting work that used the organizational and financial skills I'd spent years developing. There were complications, industry speculation about our relationship, the occasional rival who tested whether I could be used as leverage, 2 separate incidents in the first year that required Elliot's security team to become involved in ways that frightened me before they were resolved. But we'd been honest about what this was, about what it would be, and honesty, I'd learned, is an extraordinary foundation, sturdier than most of the alternatives. He proposed on a Tuesday, which was so like him that I laughed when he did it. We were sitting at the kitchen table of the apartment we'd been sharing for 7 months, both of us working, and he set a small box down next to my coffee cup and said, "I'd like this to be permanent if you're willing." I looked at the box and then at him, at the man who had a beagle named Grant and never tied his tie quite right on the mornings he was distracted, who called his grandmother every Sunday, who had flagged a corrupt shipping operation because of 4 hospitalized dock workers, and never mentioned it once. Not once, until I asked him directly. "Yes," I said. "Obviously yes." The wedding was small, 17 people, in a rented room above the Italian restaurant on 67th Street with the bad lighting, because some places become significant and you don't always know it when they're happening. When Elliot slid a ring onto my finger, I thought about the morning a gift basket arrived at the 31st floor reception desk, and a broken coffee machine had meant I was downstairs at exactly the right time to see the security log. How things pivot on small moments. How 2 years and 4 months of quiet observation had become the thing I was most certain of. "Still convinced?" he murmured, low enough that only I could hear it. "I've been convinced since about month 8, I said. "I was just waiting for you to catch up." And the way he laughed, actually laughed, the rare full version that only happened when he forgot to be composed, was the best thing I'd seen in 2 years and 4 months. Or maybe longer. Some things are hard to date precisely, which I'd learned was fine. What mattered was that we'd arrived.